Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2011 at the Marriott Marquis in Times Square, New York City. I'm now with Doug White. Doug is Academic Director of New York University's Hyman Center on Philanthropy and Fundraising. Doug, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here and to be with you.
Thank you. Doug has been on the show before talking about his book regarding ethics in nonprofits. Doug has been stood up by two Wall Street journalists today. Originally we were supposed to be with Shelley Banjo, and then it was going to be Robert Frank, but Robert couldn't come. Shelley doesn't cover the philanthropy beat anymore for the Wall Street Journal. Robert wasn't able to make it for the interview. So on the fly, I wanted to talk to Doug about his recent op-ed piece in the Chronicle of Philanthropy about the proliferation of nonprofits and some of the unusual groups that apply for status and get it. Doug, what's the premise of your recent op-ed?
Well, I guess it's fair to say that part of the premise is that we're still here.
Yeah.
As you may know, some people thought that after May 21 of this year, we wouldn't be here any longer.
Okay, yeah.
The
rapture.
The rapture. And of course, May 22nd did come, and today is June 10, and perhaps other days will come following this.
But only through October 15th.
That's another thing. We have to kind of stock up for that, I guess.
Right.
But the question came to me because he comes out of a church in California.
This is Mr. Camping.
This is Harold Camping. And I thought, I wonder if there's any information about him, as he is a public charity. And lo and behold, because he's a public charity but a church, I didn't expect to find any information about his organization. But I did. And I found out that it's fairly large. In fact, they raised over $15 million 2 years ago.
Okay.
$18 million, $70 million in assets. Net assets.
$70 million.
$70 million. Yeah. So this is not a small organization. It's not a small enterprise. And what occurred to me was, here's a fellow who's trying to tell everybody the end of the world is coming, and yet he's actually stockpiling his own charity. Mm-hmm. I thought there was an inconsistency to that. But what was even more interesting to me was that he was spending our money, your money, our money, the taxpayers' money, to send this message out. What I thought was rather stupid and ridiculous and meaningless. And even the most observant religious leaders in our society felt he was rather foolish. And so it's not a question of saying, to me anyway, is this an argument about Planned Parenthood versus National Right to Life, or NRA versus the Sierra Club, or organizations that would contend against one another. This was a guy who was clearly spending our money to put forth a lot of falsehoods.
Yeah, let's make it clear how he's spending our money. Why do you put it that way?
A couple of reasons. You saw the advertisements all over the United States. Those were paid for by his organization. Now, when I say our money, I mean that we are subsidizing him through our tax deduction system. And so when we make a $10 gift to a charitable organization and we're in the 30% tax bracket, for example, we only spend $7 to make that $10 gift. The other $3 comes from all of us. Mm-hmm. And so that's the nature of our deduction system in the United States. It's a philosophically based one, and we could argue that, but that's how it works. And so by virtue of providing this deduction in this tax system, we are saying this organization is useful in some way or another to society. And so my question was, in what way is this person's perspective useful to society? Why are we paying for that?
Yeah.
Now, I had a class on this the other night, and I get it. And by the way, on the Chronicle editorial, there have already been 40 people who've responded. Almost all of them have taken me to task, which is fine, because I am conflicted about the larger question. I think Harold Camping is a nut, and I'll just say that. But the question more philosophically is, what kind of a role do charities play in society, and is there room for that kind of person in our charitable world? I'd like to say no, but I'd also like to acknowledge that the idea of becoming a charity in society is so philosophically based as to how we would advance our world that we don't want to say no to too many people.
Yeah, I mean, that's I don't know if people took you to task in this respect, but that's the slippery slope. I mean, IRS is charged with approving the Form 1023, which is a 501c3 application for nonprofit status and tax-exempt status, I should say, and they are looking just for certain things in terms of, is there a public benefit to the organization's work, and do they have bylaws, and do they have a board, etc. But in terms of starting to look at whether there's value to society in that organization's mission, that's a pretty slippery slope.
The phrase slippery slope was used by more than one respondent.
Okay. All right, so then I'm consistent with your comments.
You're right on.
The comments you got, yeah.
And I have to say that I don't want to be dogmatic about saying this kind of a person should not get his tax exemption, but the fact of the matter is, and this is an interesting issue as well, the IRS rejects about 2% of its applications.
Yeah, no, it's very low. Yeah.
Very, very low. And when they do reject it, it's mostly on the basis of something mechanical. They didn't put enough people on their board, for example, something like that. They don't really go into the idea of whether this is really going to further society. As long as the application talks about those areas, or one of those areas that the Congress has put forth.
Charitable, education, religion, etc. Well, not religion doesn't have to apply, but educational, scientific, research, etc. Yeah,
that's correct.
No, I know. Well, right, but that's the struggle of a government agency. I mean, they're charged with a very narrow task. Who are we going to put in charge of deciding the value to society?
Okay, now I get that, but then the question then comes back to this, I feel. What's the specialness of being a charity then? I mean, if everybody who says he or she wants to do a good thing pretty much automatically gets the charitable status, what's the big deal of having a charitable status?
Well, there's tax exemption. The organization gets benefit.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. But I get that's the benefit to them.
Right. Everybody can get it. So
right.
But isn't that the part of isn't the charitable sector in our country so well ingrained and not literally unique, but very rare in the world, that we should be encouraging this and we want it to flourish, and we should be open-minded about the number of charities and their missions?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly the philosophical underpinning we should bring to this table. But at the same time, if anybody who says anything almost and just mimics what's in the code about wanting to become a charity can get charitable status, then what's the value of that status? Not to that organization, I get it, but to society. And then on top of that, who's going to make any decisions past that? I mean, there has to be a point, and this is where I am conflicted, but I think we have to ask the question and go down this road somewhat. There has to be a point where not everybody gets the tax benefit, because we're all paying for it. We're all paying for it.
Yeah.
And that's a factor in this equation. And I don't pretend to have the answer to this entire conundrum, but I do feel it's something we're not talking about.
Yeah. Might the value be just another voice, another opinion in the marketplace of ideas in the charitable community?
Well, that was actually one of the reasons I wrote it, because I wanted to at least have that thought put out there. I actually agree with the slippery slope concept. I actually agree with all of the things you're pointing out about wanting to have a robust, idea-filled, a diverse world of charitable opportunity. I actually agree with that full-heartedly.
Okay.
But by the same token, that itself, taken to an extreme, and I think Harold Camping takes it to an extreme, brings us to another problem. And that's the problem that we don't talk about, and I don't know where we're going to go, but we're not talking about it. And that's what I had in mind.
Okay.
Now, in addition to that same week, it was learned that Project Veritas got its tax exemption. Now, Project Veritas is the group that brought down NPR, and they had a problem with Planned Parenthood, and Acorn, and Michael O'Keefe.
National Public Radio.
Yes.
Also, using videotape to surreptitiously record people who don't. Well, as I said, surreptitiously record people, and putting them in potentially compromising situations, and then releasing the video
Yes.
very, very widely, very publicly.
Yes. So there are all sorts of areas where, as he calls himself an independent journalist, which is what he says in both his application and on his website, there has to be some acknowledgement that that's not what a journalist is. I mean, that's not what a journalist is. He is a person with a very definite point of view, and I don't contend that he should or shouldn't have that point of view. That's his business. But he's not a journalist, number one. And we have to have some meaning to words we have in society, in our English language. And journalist has a meaning. And it means going after and writing about things that are true. And it means doing it objectively, or at least trying to do it objectively. He has no pretense to doing that. So to actually approve his application on the basis that he is thought to be a journalist is a mockery of the word journalism and, of course, the charitable process.
I think part of his application, too, was education, that he was going to train citizen journalists.
That's right. That's what he said in his application, but that isn't what he's doing. So what he's going to do in his training program is create more non-journalists. So you're right. That's what he said in his application. And again, I don't take the IRS to task if we as a society don't anymore make that distinction. And I'm not trying to go right or left with this, but I'm just saying, what if you look at all of the people he's gone after, they are all left on the left side of the ideology spectrum. He's gone after no one on the right. And let's say the Koch brothers could be fair fodder for any journalist, but he wouldn't touch them, or he hasn't. And so I'm not saying that the left should be protected, but he's not a journalist. Let's get that out. And if we can't acknowledge something like that, where the word journalist has an umbrella, it's not that specific like a chair would be a specific, everybody has an idea. But there has to be some understanding of what we mean by words. And if we get past that or get outside of that, then we're really mushing around in society, and we're allowing those newly created definitions of words to start to take over everybody's ideological spectrum, and that itself is a slippery slope as far as I'm concerned.
Doug, do you know the day that your op-ed piece was in the Chronicle of Philanthropy?
It was on the website on the 1st of June, and it'll be in the next edition like the 15th or so.
And what was the title?
Is the status of charity becoming meaningless?
That's in the Chronicle of Philanthropy. Doug White, a genuine academic, raising questions that other people aren't, and struggling with the answers to those questions, not claiming that you have them for yourself, that you have the answers.
And thank you for pointing that out. I don't claim to have the answers. And as a teacher or an academic or as an ethicist, actually as an ethicist, I feel very strongly that there are very few black and white answers. The problem I have is not so much that we don't have the answers, but we're not even interested in asking a lot of important questions.
Doug White's a friend of the show, has been on before. Doug White is academic director for the NYU Hyman Center for Philanthropy and Fundraising, and you can read his op-ed piece about the proliferation of nonprofits in the country and the types of organizations that are getting tax-exempt status in the Chronicle of Philanthropy. Doug, thank you very much for being back on the show.
It's my pleasure. Good to see you again.
It's Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2011 in Times Square, New York City at the Marriott Marquis Hotel.